Hey guys, it's Sam, and this is my spoiler-free review of The Young Elites by Marie Lu. This is the first book in a fantasy series by Marie Lu, who is the author of the Legend Trilogy. I own the first book in the Legend Trilogy, but I haven't read it yet. I was planning on reading the series before reading this, but this ended up being the first book that I've ever read by Marie Lu. It is set in a world where a blood fever has ravaged the entire world, and all of the adults that it has affected are dead. The majority of the children that it has affected are either dead or marked in a way, have some kind of scar. For example, our main character is missing her eye. And some of the children that were affected and scarred also end up having these kinds of superpowers, and these people are nicknamed the Young Elites. This story follows our main character, Adelina. She is a girl who is a young elite, although she doesn't know it at the beginning of the story. She is being sold off by her dad, who basically hates her because these people that are marked are kind of looked down on as second-class citizens. So she's being sold off by her dad to a man who wants to make her his mistress because she's not fit to be a wife. So she runs away, something happens, and she ends up being taken by the Inquisitors in this scenario, where all these people are being gathered up by the Inquisitors to basically be killed, kind of like witch burnings and stuff from the Inquisition that we all know about in reality. On the day that she's going to be executed, she ends up being saved by the group known as the Young Elites, and the story kind of takes off from there. This book is written in multiple perspectives. Mostly it's in Adelina's perspective, but we do get perspectives of the other kinds of characters. I didn't feel that that was done very well. I felt like it could have been all in Adelina's perspective, because the other perspectives that we got, I didn't feel that there was a different narrative voice for each one, so they kind of all blended together, and it was mostly in Adelina's perspective anyway, so I felt like it could have stayed in her perspective the entire time. Let me first talk about the world in this. There is a map in the front that lays out a bunch of different areas in this world, but I didn't really feel like it was utilized. In my fantasy, I've come to kind of expect this kind of political intrigue element, that if there's a map in the front, these places are going to be brought up and explained, their significance is going to be explained, and the places that were in the map in the front were not brought up, were not explained, were very briefly mentioned, if at all, and a lot of the mentioning happened towards the very, very end of the book anyway. So I didn't really get this political build-up that I was kind of expecting from this book. Also, the fantasy elements of this book I found really lacking. I think that a lot of things felt like they were thrown in just to make it a fantasy book and weren't really explained and really didn't fit in with the story, and I wasn't really sure how they tied in at all. For example, it is mentioned at one point that there are 3 moons in this world, but there's nothing else really said about it. Also, there are different beasts that are mentioned that are kind of fantastical beasts, but they're not our typical dragons or anything like that, so they kind of warranted explanation, and we really didn't get any. So I really felt like these kind of fantasy elements were thrown in just to kind of make it a fantasy. Also, at the beginning of each chapter, there's a little blurb, usually a paragraph or so, from a text that you can only assume is from this world, but those texts are never explained or brought up. There's a similar thing that's done in the Delirium trilogy by Lauren Oliver, but those texts are then mentioned, their significance is brought up within the books. This really wasn't. There was a few that kind of tied in, but for the most part, they weren't really tied in at all, so I was left wondering what their significance was. One element of world building I really did enjoy was the magic or power aspect of the world. The powers were explained in a very, very cool way, very original, and you did get a really great visual of them and how they worked, and I really appreciated that because the magic system in here, or the power system, however you want to phrase it, was very interesting. Secondly, I want to talk about the characters. Adelina is our main character. As I said, she is the character whose head we are in the majority of the time, and she is a very dark and different character. She's a very different heroine than we are used to seeing. As I said, she's very dark, she has a very tragic past, and a lot of those things affect her very deeply, and she really doesn't come out of that darkness within this book, at least. Having said that, I really didn't feel that she was developed enough as a character. I didn't feel like she had a very strong character arc, and I really didn't think she changed much throughout the novel, and I really was expecting more from her. I was expecting her to be a little more heroic than she really ended up being, and to kind of mature more throughout the story. Secondly, I want to talk about the love interest in this book. I'm not going to say who the love interest is, but he is a bad boy. And surprisingly enough, I didn't like him. I know, shocking, right? I felt no butterflies about their romance, and I felt that the romance was very forced. I don't want to say it was insta-love because that's not the impression that I got, but it was very, very closely related to insta-love. There was no kind of build-up or anything like that, no kind of relationship development before the kissing started happening and the word love was thrown around in Adelina's head. There is not one scene before all of that relationship-y stuff starts happening where the characters are alone together and we get to see them talking, and I felt no reason for her to be falling head over heels for this guy and vice versa. And it was very, very unbelievable. Like I said, I got no butterflies from this relationship whatsoever, and that is extremely rare for me. Not only does this character not talk to Adelina very much, he doesn't really talk to anybody very much, so you don't get a sense of him even outside of their relationship. He's very stoic, bad boy, typical kind of character, but you don't really get to feel any kind of emotional connection to him, or at least I didn't. There's also a plethora of side characters in here among the young elites, all of these different kind of people with different powers, and again, I really didn't feel like there was any kind of development of them. There is no kind of backstory for really any of them, and you only get very brief glimpses of them, and I feel like there was so much potential there, and I really felt like I left the story not really getting anything out of those side characters. Now onto the plot. This book was very, very fast-paced. The chapters are very small, and you are able to just fly through the story. Also, the twists that happened were very, very unexpected, but those twists didn't happen until the last about 50 or so pages, so I really felt like I was just waiting for something really big to happen, and when it did, like I said, it was the complete opposite of what I expected to happen. So it doesn't follow the very cliche tropes that we're expecting, and although I thought that was cool, I really didn't like it that much. The things that did happen I found very off-putting, but I give Marie Lu a lot of credit for doing things that were completely polar opposite of what I was expecting. So overall, I give The Young Elites 3.5 stars. I was originally going to give it 3 stars, but I wanted to give it an extra 0.5 for those unexpected twists. There were a lot of things that were very different than what I was expecting, and I wanted to give the book an extra score for that. But like I said, this book mostly was a huge letdown for me. It has been a few days, and I'm still kind of reeling from the disappointment of it. I had pre-ordered this book, and I was really looking forward to it. It was described as a X-Men meets Assassin's Creed, the video game, which are two of my favorite things, and I was just holding this in such high esteem. I had heard nothing but good reviews for it, and this just really, really fell short for me. As I said before, I've never read anything else by Marie Lu, but maybe her writing style remains the same, so if you liked the Legend trilogy, I'm sure you would also like this. It sounds like a lot of people that were fans of Legend also enjoyed this book. Also, if you're not a huge fan of fantasy, or you don't really like a lot of world building and you find world building very boring, then I would still consider giving this a go, because like I said, there is not a ton of world building, but that's something that you don't like, then you probably will really enjoy this book. Overall, like I said, I feel like this book was overhyped, and it kind of ruined the experience for me, honestly. I feel like maybe if it wouldn't have been as hyped, I could have enjoyed it more, but honestly there was a lot of things that were lacking for me that I was really expecting from this book. At this point, I do plan on reading the rest of the books that come out in this series. I'm going to be paying attention more to reviews that do come out, and maybe not pre-order the books in the rest of the series like I did this one, and just kind of see what the reception is for it and see if I'll enjoy it, maybe even rent them from my library. But for right now, I have a really bad taste in my mouth from this book, and I'm very, very disappointed. So let me know in the comments if you have read this book and what you thought of it. Am I one of the only people who didn't consider this book 5 stars, or am I not alone in this? I would love to hear your comments and opinions. I know this book was only released this last week, but for those of you that have read it, comment down below and let me know, and hopefully my disappointment will wane a little bit in the future with this book. So that is it for the review. Thank you all for watching, guys, and I'll see all of you guys soon. Bye!